Whelan Presley Funeral Home and Crematory have been serving Quad City families and veterans since 1889. Whelan Presley Funeral Homes are located in Rock Island, Milan, and Reynolds, and are proud supporters of WQPT. Alternatives is a proud supporter of WQPT and has been serving our community for 40 years. Alternatives provides professional guidance to maintain independence and quality of life for older adults and adults with disabilities.
Iowa Republicans are ready to take center stage in Des Moines, stronger than ever. And one key player in the legislative process has roots right here in the cities. On Monday, Iowa state lawmakers will convene for the start of the 2023 legislative session. Republicans will be in greater control after making big gains statewide in the November elections. They will have a supermajority in the Senate and a stronger majority in the House. It's in the House where Bettendorf Republican Gary Moore will be a powerful voice in the coming session. As the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, he will help steer the Reynolds administration's budget plans and other fiscal measures. Representative Moore talked about that and his other top priorities. What have you learned from the November elections statewide? Republicans did amazingly well from the Missouri River to the Mississippi River.
Jim, I think one of the things I've learned is now we represent in the Iowa House of Representatives virtually all 99 counties in the state.
A portion of, I think, 97 of the 99.
I think it was 97 before. Now I think it's all 99.
Is that all right?
And I think what that tells me is that people must be happy with what we're doing. I'm sure there's things we do that they're not happy with, but by and large, I think the people of Iowa know we manage their money well, we don't spend excessively, and we think we're good caretakers of state government. I think that's the lesson I learned after the November election.
Well, you take a look in, I believe it was September or October, where the state finances came out and the state had even more money left over in its coffers after the budgeting. And I thought, wow, you can easily run on that about fiscal responsibility.
Right. Well, as Appropriations Chairman in the House,
that's what I want to talk about.
I feel very good about that. I want to assure the people of Iowa their tax money is spent wisely. It's spent conservatively. We always spend less than what we take in. Our savings accounts are full. We have $820 roughly $1 million in savings accounts. We have an $8.2 billion budget. We have $2.6 billion in taxpayer relief funds, which is what's going to go back to the taxpayers and taxpayer relief. And yet we're still providing basic services of government. So I'm very pleased with that. And as long as we're in control of the legislature, I expect we're going to continue to spend less than what we take in and spend the money conservatively and spend it wisely.
Spending the money wisely is also investing in the future. And do you think that Iowa is doing that well enough? And of course, that starts with education.
Sure.
K through 12. Let's start with K through 12.
Okay. Let me put it in perspective for you. I mentioned to you we have an $8.2 billion budget. $3.6 billion of it goes to K through 12 education, roughly 40-some%. That's the biggest piece of our state budget. $1.6 billion of our budget goes to Medicaid. People who have are low income, elderly people with no assets go to nursing homes.
It's the safety net.
It's the safety net, that's right, for children of low income families. Then another $1 billion goes to higher education. Between K through 12, the $3.6 billion, the $1 billion in higher ed, and $1.6 billion in Medicaid, that's 75% of our budget, right there. Everything else in state government lives off the other 25%. So our priorities, if we look at what our priorities are going to be, they're going to remain to be education, be it K through 12 or higher education, and it's going to be health care for most low-income families. That's 75% of our budget right there.
I know you don't believe that throwing money at a problem solves the problem. But do you have some worries about the quality of Iowa's education? Because 20, 30 years ago, it was stellar. I mean, you had the Iowa tests that you took nationwide. Are you worried that Iowa has lost that prestige?
I think there's a lot of other factors than money, Jim, that probably contribute to that. We have 100 members of the House, 50 members of the Senate, 3 million Iowans. I could probably go out and interview every one of those people and get a different opinion on how much should be spent. I'm sure your opinions and my opinions would be somewhat different. We have to invest as much as we think we can financially afford and get the biggest bang for the buck. No, I'm not in favor of just throwing money at the problem. I think we've increased our contributions to K through 12 education every year for the last 10 years. We've been in control of the legislature, and we'll increase it again this year. And the same thing with higher education expenses. The question comes, do you think it's enough? Do our citizens think it's enough? Or what I think is enough? And I think we're doing an adequate job with that. Sure, we can always spend more money, but you have to remember, operating the state budget is no different than operating your personal budget. If you put more money into this area or that area, that means less money for this area and this area.
And so when we talk about generalities about an increase in funding, what about targeted money? I mean, are there areas in the education system that you believe need to see greater funding, or areas that you think should be far less funded?
One of the things I think we'll deal with this session, there seems to be a lot of interest in the House for reducing categorical funding, meaning monies that we appropriate just for this purpose or for that purpose. That I think we'll see some movement to allow the local schools more flexibility. We'll appropriate the money, but let them decide how much goes into this pot, how much goes into that pot. Because what you end up with is when you fund categorically, at the end of the year, they'll end up with excess money in this account, but they can't transfer it over here.
Because they didn't need this, and they needed that.
Right, and each school district might operate differently. One school district needs more here, one school district needs more here.
So less state control,
but
not necessarily less money.
Exactly, yes.
What about school vouchers then? You know that's coming up in this session.
Yes.
The governor is a top priority.
Yes.
She's still stung by some Republicans and the Democrats in the last session.
That's right.
This is definitely happening.
As you may know, last year the governor came out, and first of all, let me say, education was my background. I was a community college administrator. So education is a priority for me. Private education is important to me, and public education is important to me. They're two different avenues. And I think it's important that we provide and keep the independence of the two. Last year, the governor came out with a school voucher program that I opposed, which was unusual for a Republican. But my concern was, with the governor's plan, we appropriate roughly $7,400 per student that goes to local schools to educate in our public schools. Under the governor's plan, she wanted to send $5,000 of that to parochial school, public school, private school, and then the remaining $2,500 she was going to send to a small rural school in Iowa enrolling less than 500 students. That made no sense to me. Why would I, who represents the Pleasant Valley and Bettendorf school districts, vote for something that would take $2,500 that the legislature appropriated for me to educate our kids and send that to a small rural district somewhere else in Iowa? And I opposed her bill on that basis. I haven't seen her bill for the coming year.
All right.
But let me tell you, my overarching concern is, being a supporter of both public education and private education, is if we start mixing tax money with private schools, and a year, 2, 3, 4 years from now, the future legislature says any school district, public or private, that receives tax money is going to have to adhere to the same state curriculum, state rules and regulations, then all of our schools will become the same as they are today. And we'll lose that independence of the private schools. That scares me. And I caution parents who send their kids to private schools who want me to approve of the school voucher bill, be careful what you wish for. Because if 3 or 4 or 5 years, the future legislature requires those private schools to adopt a state curriculum and operate just like public schools, what are they going to do? Then we've lost that independence of the private school sector. That's my overarching concern with this issue. I'm not sure we're ready for this.
You are the head of the Appropriations Committee. You are becoming a veteran Republican lawmaker in the legislature. You know the pressure that's going to be on you to approve this because the governor will want to win.
That's right.
What is it going to take to win your vote, and how confident you are that you can say no to such a powerful establishment now, the Republican Party of Iowa?
Well, Jim, I'm 71. I turned 71 last week.
Congratulations.
There's not a lot of pressure that people can put on me. I will look at the bill. I will look at what the governor proposes. I'm sure there'll be other bills introduced on this issue of vouchers. I will take a look at them. And I believe strongly in private school education. I believe strongly in public school education. But at the final analysis, I will make a decision of what I think most of my constituents want and what I think is best for the children of Iowa, and I'll vote that way. And no pressure is going to come upon me that's going to alter my position once I make that decision.
Let's talk about some of the social issues that we're expecting to see in the legislature in this coming session. One would be, of course, abortion. The other one being gun rights after the proposition that won. Let's start with abortion. Where do you stand on that, and where do you see Iowa going? Do you see a total ban is in the future for Iowa?
Well, I believe in pro-life. Now, saying that, there's been a sea change in this issue with the Iowa Supreme Court ruling a number of years ago that the right to an abortion is not in the Iowa Constitution, and the recent overturning of the federal Supreme Court of that case. And after a few years ago, when the legislature passed the heartbeat bill, and a judge declared that unconstitutional, it's been tied up in the courts.
It's now being challenged, and the governor says she wants to see it go to the Supreme Court.
Exactly. I don't think the legislature will make any changes or deal with it legislatively while it's in the court process. I think what we'll wait to see is what happens with that court decision. Where does that end up, and what's the final decision? Based on that, then the legislature might get involved again, but that's down the road, and I don't know how we'll get involved because I don't know what the rulings are going to be through the courts.
Current law is that abortion is still available up to 20 weeks of pregnancy. Is that something you support, or is that something you want to see change?
Well, I did support that when it was originally passed, and so at this point I support it because it is the law of Iowa until we get through the court process, and we'll see what the courts rule, how the courts rule, and what options come forward at that time. I don't know if that'll be this session or next session, but until then, I don't see any legislative action being taken on the issue of abortion.
Because as you said, that's in the courts.
Right.
In the land of public opinion, you had the Second Amendment right bill, proposition that went before voters, a strong yes vote, more than 60%. And to put Second Amendment rights in the Constitution isn't that big of a deal, but as you know, there's that other legislation that's in there. That's in there that says you really can't take gun rights away now, and you can add restrictions. What do you see, and what do you want to see? And you're hearing it already. I mean, the gun rights organizations have already said this is what we want to do. Is this what we're going to see in the legislature?
Well, again, what you're referring to is the strict scrutiny language that was in the constitutional amendment. The voters did approve it with 66% approval. So I don't know that any drastic legislative changes will be made to gun rights with the adoption of the constitutional amendment. But we'll have to see where this goes. But you're absolutely right. There was strong support for that from the people of Iowa. And we'll see now what legislation comes forward. But that was a strong message that the people of Iowa sent to us as legislators, that they want their Second Amendment rights protected.
Well, and you were seeing it county by county by county. You know that as well, is that they were putting, that counties were making resolutions saying, wait, we're strong adherents of Second Amendment. So you had seen that groundswell at the county level, and then you see it statewide. Were you surprised at the vote?
I was a little surprised at how 66%.
Right.
In this political climate, it's tough to get 66% approval on anything.
Well, and it was a good barometer election because you did have races and you had perhaps more Democrats coming out.
Right. Yeah, I was a little surprised at the size of the victory, but again, we read those messages from the voters of Iowa, and they've told us they support Second Amendment rights. So we'll see what other legislation comes forward, but I think the issue of whether or not that should be included in the Constitution has been resolved.
We talked about the tax bill last year and the differences that were occurring as far as taxation of Iowa residents. And you're very proud of the elimination of the retirement taxes in Iowa, which was already in existence in Illinois. You're saying that you're already seeing an impact on that.
Yes. I sponsored the original bill to eliminate retirement income taxes in Iowa because here in eastern Iowa, so many of our residents, and my wife and I have a lot of friends who moved here 40 years ago as we did. They built their careers here, they raised their families here, they built their wealth, if they had any wealth here. And as soon as they retire, they change their state of residence to Florida, Texas, Illinois, or other states that don't tax retirement income. And we're losing hundreds of millions of dollars. I called the IPERS state retirement program when I introduced the bill and asked how much state money, retirement money, is going out of state. And they send $200 million a year to Iowa retirees who've moved out of state. And I asked, what states does that money go to? And it was Florida, Texas, and Illinois. And I knew from our own experience that there's a big financial drain to Iowa with that money leaving the state, which is why I introduced the bill. That will take effect here in a few weeks, January 1, and the people of Iowa, when they retire, all of their retirement income, pensions, 401ks, 403bs, will not be state income taxed in the state of Iowa. I think it's a huge step forward. The other thing we did last year was on income taxes. We started a 5-year decline of personal income taxes that will ultimately end at a 3.9% income tax rate. The reason for all of this is we've managed the money well. We have the $2.6 billion in taxpayer relief funds. We can afford to cut those taxes. The idea was once we manage the money and we can afford to cut the taxes, we cut the taxes and hopefully keep people and recruit people to live in the state of Iowa. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the one that surprised me the most is after we passed the retirement bill, I had probably 40 phone calls from people primarily in Illinois who said, Representative Moore, we grew up in Iowa. My wife and I grew up on farms in Iowa. We moved to Illinois, took a career, built our career. We were going to have to stay in Illinois when we retire because they don't tax pensions. But now that you've passed that bill, we want to move back to Iowa, to our hometown, and retire. That was music to my ears. I hadn't thought about that as an option. So we think it's good for the economy of Iowa and good for the residents of Iowa.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this coming year also going to be a change in the business tax rate because of the surplus that we saw in the year?
Yes.
What impact do you think that's going to have?
Our business community is very pleased about that. And what we did there, corporate taxes are a little more difficult to predict. So we basically set the rule that if corporate taxes, once they hit a $700 million payment to the state of Iowa, their corporate taxes will decline. And so we think also corporate taxes will decline over a period of years. And we think that will help our business climate, retain industries to Iowa, recruit industries to Iowa. We think the trifecta of personal income tax reduction, retirement income tax reduction, corporate tax reduction will be very good for the people of Iowa and for our economy.
Because you talked about keeping seniors in Iowa, keeping young people and workers and these kids that graduate college and then immediately leave Iowa.
Right.
I mean, that's been a concern for decades.
Right.
Do you see this as being perhaps a factor in keeping people here?
I do. In fact, another issue I'm going to be working on this session, Jim, is that workforce piece. We have companies all over who are having great difficulty in recruiting people to work for their companies. But they're having difficulty recruiting people to Iowa. And I want to work on a plan that we can help them recruit people to this state and move to this state. We don't have mountains, we don't have oceans, but we're going to have lower taxes, and we want to put together a package that's going to help recruit the highly skilled people to this state.
Out of curiosity, where does childcare play in that? Because you, especially after the pandemic and during it, I mean, that seems to be, if you're going to use the word crisis somewhere, nationwide, but in Iowa in particular, that seems to be a crisis for working families.
It is. In fact, child care was a priority the last 2 legislative sessions in Iowa. We passed a number of bills to help create more child care centers, to help set them up within companies, to help make people who want to go into the child care profession a priority in the education world. Child care will remain a priority for the Iowa legislature for the foreseeable future.
But what can be done? Because, I mean, Iowa has already lessened the requirements to watch over children, the number of children, the age of children, how much of education background you have to have. What more can you do to incentivize more people to get into the child care industry?
Well, I don't have the plan here in front of me today, but as we work with companies, as we work with child care leaders, they will help us determine what some of those things are. But we simply have to provide more child care options. That will also help get more people into the workforce, where we're having problems getting people to work for companies now. If they have good child care available, that will help them be possible for them to go back to work.
Other issue, of course, in Iowa that you've struggled with is how to deal with mental health coverage and care throughout the state. And you take a look at the gun laws, and when there are these terrible shootings, it's two components. It is the gun, and then it is oftentimes the mental health of the perpetrator.
Right.
What do you see as far as Iowa's role in the coming session to improve mental health care for the citizens?
Very good question, Jim. In fact, last year we did a major change in how we operate mental health. We took away the need for counties to assess property tax, and we funded it from a state level. Again, another advantage of managing your money so you've got money to do these things. What we're hearing out there is that our local communities are very pleased with our new funding mechanism. So we're going to be watching that very closely. We've increased money to put into mental health. We'll probably do so again this year, but we're going to be watching very closely to see how that regional change improves mental health. But we'll be working with other legislators or other legislation to complement that organizational change.
We just have a moment left. What's your priority for 2023? What are you hoping for?
Well, the one I'm hearing most about from my constituents is property tax relief. Now, we understand it's easier for us to eliminate retirement income taxes, that's state money. Or reduce personal income taxes, that's state money. Or reduce corporate taxes, that's state money. But property taxes are schools, counties, cities, and so we're very cognizant of that. However, I'm hearing a lot of constituents who say, Representative Moore, I'm a retiree. I'm on a fixed income. Every year my property taxes go up. I'm afraid I'm going to have to sell my house. I can't stay in it. There are other people who say, Representative Moore, property tax is a shell game. My city or my county or my school says they've held the line on the rates, but my property taxes keep going up. Would you take a look at it and see if there are ways we can minimize the growth of property taxes? I can't afford that. Now, I don't know what we're going to do with that, but when I hear that from so many of my constituents, we're going to take a look at that. I don't know what we're going to do, if anything, but we will commit to the people of Iowa. Now that we've done those other taxes, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to take a look at property taxes, and that'll be a priority of this legislative session.
Iowa State Representative Gary Moore, chairman of the Iowa House Appropriations Committee. The Iowa legislature starts its 2023 legislative session on Tuesday. Welcome to 2023. The holidays are over, but that doesn't mean the fun is finished, right? Laura Adams bought herself a new calendar for the new year, and she started filling it with some great ideas for you as you go out and about.
This is Out and About for January 6th through 14th. The QCCA Expo Center hosts the annual Bald Eagle Days with demonstrations and activity booths January 6th through the 8th. NABE, or Not Another Bridal Expo, takes over the River Center on the 7th from 3 to 8, while the Galesburg Community Chorus invites you to join them. Rehearsals begin January 9th at the First Presbyterian Church at 7. The world-famous Harlem Globetrotters return for one night of amazing basketball action at the Vibrant Arena on the 10th. Junior Tally recreates the early days of Elvis, performing the 8th in the Rhythm Room at River City Casino, while the Commodores perform in the Rhythm City Event Center on the 8th at 8. There's plenty of comedy with Tommy Davidson at Rhythm City on the 7th. GIT Improv brings the Ha-Ha to the Black Box Theater on the 7th at 7:30, and Comedy Sports perform Friday and Saturdays at the Spotlight Theater. Auditions for Charlotte's Web for Morrison Music Theater will be January 12th at 7 and the 14th at 2 at Morrison Tech. Auditions for Oliver at the Spotlight Theater are the 13th from 6 to 8 and the 14th from 10 to 12. And Music Guild auditions for Rent take place January 14th from 10 to 2 and the 15th from 1 to 3 at the theater. For more information, visit wqpt.org.
Thank you, Laura. 3 years ago, the drummer known as Dead Ginger joined us on the stage of the Black Box Theater for the original series of performances that were recorded by WQPT. And one of those originals we want to play for you tonight. Here's Dead Ginger with Clarity to Chaos. Dead Ginger with Clarity to Chaos, performed at the Black Box Theater in Moline. On the air, on the radio, on the web, on your mobile device, and streaming on your computer, thanks for taking some time to join us as we talk about the issues on the cities.
Whelan Presley Funeral Home and Crematory have been serving Quad City families and veterans since 1889. Whelan Presley Funeral Homes are located in Rock Island, Milan, and Reynolds, and are proud supporters of WQPT. Alternatives is a proud supporter of WQPT and has been serving our community for 40 years. Alternatives provides professional guidance to maintain independence and quality of life for older adults and adults with disabilities.